All right, so thank you all for coming out to the 9th episode, edition. I don't know, and I've lost track of what this is actually called. The 9th event in the David Has Zoom Pro for a few months reading series, which has turned out to be David Has Zoom Pro for at least a year. If not, it will be more, because it is now a year since I had to start signing up for it. So it kind of started off as a joke. I was going to start a reading series, David Has Zoom Pro, because I had Zoom Pro and I wanted to make better use of it. And I think I did that. I'm going to keep doing that. But now the name doesn't make as much sense as it did when I was like, oh, I'm going to do 3 of these and then the semester's over. And that's that. But again, thank you all for coming out. We have 4 amazing readers tonight. We have Kara Vernor, Ryan Ridge, Tyler Barton, and Lucy Zhang. And I thank them all for spending their Thursday night with me and with all of us, sharing their amazing work. We're just going to go ahead and get started. I always encourage folks to use the chat. It's one of the, I don't know, pros of having a Zoom reading. You can actually yell out stuff during a reading and it's not distracting. It's actually encouraged. So please go ahead, yell things out in the chat. Tell our readers what you love, why you love them. All right, and our first reader is Kara Vernor, whose stories have been included in the Best Small Fictions, Best Microfiction, Wigleaf's Top 50, and the forthcoming Norton Anthology Flash Fiction America. Her fiction chapbook, Because I Want to Write You a Pop Song, is available from Split Lip Press. She lives in Napa, California.
Thanks so much for having me. I haven't done this for a while, and I was picking out stuff to read and thinking, like, I'm a weirdo, but I'm so happy that I'm reading with other weirdos. So I think it's just all gonna like blend together in a nice way. I'm just gonna read a bunch of short stuff, like really short stuff. I think, David, normally you were doing prose poetry, and this is like the flash exception, is that correct?
Oh, normally it was just poetry, but then
okay.
Tyler asked me if I did flash fiction, and yeah, I mean, why not? It's the awesome cousin of prose poetry.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I picked short stuff, sort of thinking about your theme, particularly, not that, I'll flash a short, but so I'm going to read 5 short ones. This first one is called Manhandlers. Many women are handlers. They're better at taking care of business because their brain hemispheres are pals. If their hemispheres went to the bar, they'd talk breezily over a hummus plate and beers, while men's would only eye each other from across the pool table. That's what I learned at the JC, though sure, in different words. I learned too, and this part is verbatim, that depressed people are more realistic, which, if you think about it, is a sad fact for all of us. I've never understood wanting to handle a man, because even though I have the hemispheres for it, I can't find the motivation. I suffer generally from low motivation and the inability to contribute anything but store-bought food to potlucks. I am destined for a life of handling only myself. My brother can handle no one else nor himself, but maybe that is to be expected. It's obvious he regrets not being born with cabinet handles screwed into his deltoids so a good-looking woman can grab a hold and steer him. A woman like that would have stopped him from jumping off that rooftop into a pool on a dare. His belly flop smack frightening the dog, who took off into the street as the stretch Hummer was bringing more cocaine. Maybe then he wouldn't have ruined the party for everyone else, including his former best friend and kickball team captain, Tommy. Maybe he would have lasted more than 6 months at a job. There are women, I've known many, who handle for free, who remind men what to buy at the store and when to call their mothers to wish them happy birthday, and how many lines is too many lines, and the exact words to use in conversations that are not about the weather or sports. I'm sure if my psych professor did a study, he'd find that these women are a statistically significant reason men still occupy the presidency and Congress and the management positions at the fast food establishments I frequent. Though the majority of the line staff are not men, I've counted. So when my brother stopped by and said he'd been fired again, this time from his job selling Hyundais because he was boning the secretary, and why can't we go back to the 80s when it was still legal to have fun, I felt a bolt of energy, an idea. I grabbed his shoulder and looked seriously into his face. I told him to buy that secretary some flowers and whatever ring he could afford, and get down on one knee, and also say these specific things when he's doing it, because we had a shot at swindling a handling professional into a lifetime of free services. And even with the lackluster communication between his hemispheres, he ought to be able to recognize that deal. He agreed, I think. I don't know. He said a new episode of Top Gear would be on soon, and could we talk about it later? But I mean, realistically speaking, what other options does he have? Okay. I like to start with that one because I figure it kind of offends everyone. There's just something in there to offend everyone. I picked these next two because Ryan and his crew were kind enough to publish them at Juked. So I thought that would be fun. So here is The Critic. At an estate sale, I bought an oil painting in a gilded frame of a severe-looking man who I do not find attractive. The painting is skilled. A glint in the man's eye and flush in his face make him seem animate, but the man himself appears harsh, so I do not often look at him. The painting hangs on my wall, my desk faces. I notice in moments when I've stopped typing on my keyboard, when I've been staring into oblivion, that his eyes are like mine, shadowed by the weight of his brow, the outer corners downturned. Or rather, they are the eyes of my father, who passed them on to me and who was also severe. I can tell by the strength of his nose, the tight crease between his lips, that the man was distinguished in his time. His unattractiveness did not prevent him from standing proudly for hours while a talented painter preserved his face for future generations. His black cloak and white collar suggest gainful employment in an official position, but more than his clothes, his face and bold hair, the tufts of gray muffing his ears, emanate final decisions. I admit I've tried to force him to look away, to blink first. The angle of his chin antagonizes. When I grow tired of his steady attention, I tilt the frame. At the restaurant where my father and I ate our dinners, the walls held ordinary landscape paintings, evenly spaced. My father would gaze past me into their distance when I spoke to him, until he grew angry at me for talking too much. I can't make out the signature on the back of the canvas, but the date remains, 1881. I don't know enough about history to say if he was a live man painted at that time, which I assume, or a dead man painted from a photograph taken 30 years earlier, which is a possibility. Either way, he's dead now, like my father, except on the wall above my desk, where his judgment lives on. All right. Let's see. Okay. This one's called, I should say these are all fiction. Sometimes I just feel the need to be sure people know that. Okay. This one's called More Sex. I used to have more sex than the other women I knew, the men too. I wondered, is a behavior automatically abnormal if it falls outside a norm? I would step on each stair, the 4 flights up to my studio, reminiscing the moles, the wrinkles, the stray squirrely hairs. I used to wonder if something was wrong with me. A friend once said I hunted sex, but that was dramatic. I had no violence in me or need to mount trophies. I was no conquistador or adolescent boy. A few times when I was motivated by loneliness, I did commit a foul. My desperation dulled the party. My desperation, like an old high school friend in from out of town who I was stuck bringing along. But most of the time I found no reason for shame. Besides certain meals, roasted crab, wild mushroom, and charred risotto, there's nothing better than sex with someone you've never smelled before. Nothing better than catching an eye, the camera focusing on one flower in a field. The first careful words and ensuing flirtation, the unbearable anticipation while searching for 4 private walls, and at last his bare body, a brand new New York City, all the dirty alleys, all the splendor. The sex I had wasn't wholly spectacular. Occasionally, a penis wasn't for me. Some were discolored or shaped like an overweight banana. Some were attached to an alcoholic and a bit soft. I found this more in my 30s than my 20s, the sexual dysfunctions of unmarried men. That's not why I no longer have sex. I guess I became interested in other quests, to rebloom my orchids year after year. But I wish I had had more sex before my libido waned. In middle age now, I think of all the hours of dark I wasted, the even more men I could have traveled. And I do miss bodies, some touch other than the dogs, other than the hugs of my friends. If only I wanted sex now, I could have touch anytime. The technology exists, the online menu of willing men. It's true that life is short, but also long. I don't know why people don't have all the sex they can while they're young and driven to it. That was my horny one. All right. Now I'm going to get into my demented one. This is called Ruins. The day I was to marry my father arrived. I had not seen him in more than 15 years, but the consensus seemed to be I was lucky he would have me. I had been trying to escape him for more than 15 years, but here was my torso bound in a white dress within an ornate room. My girlfriends had sat me and were tapping my face with puffs. They raked back my black hair. Out the window, the grounds rolled with ferns, redwood trees, and juvenile grasses. So much money had been spread. The guests clustered around the fountain of champagne, scooping into it for refills and chipping their glasses. They ate pâté grand mère, iced with bone marrow, on crackers made from seeds. Who was I to ruin it? A silk garter glided up my leg and it stopped me. I could not think of his hand slipping it off. Now, my friend said, and kept clowning my face with color sticks, netting my hair with tacky spray. One friend in the corner on a green velvet chase, my very best friend in a green velvet dress and a forlorn face. She was watching me like I was a corpse headed for a casket. I stood up and they stumbled over. All but my best friend were beetles on their backs. I whirled through them to the staircase and followed the curving banister down to the front door. Outside with the guests, someone would explain how this could be happening. Tilted against one of the nearest tall tables was my dad, a neat scotch in his hand, chatting with a family realtor. The skin covering my betrothed's face was that of a glacier melting, and sun had scorched the hair off the summit of his head. His eyes said, "Sorry, there's nothing more lethal than the years." "We can't do this," I said to him. He said, "Kara, you remember Mr. Moore?" I said, "Yes, hello, Sam." Sam said, "You look just beautiful, Kara, stunning, really." My old dad said, "We have to do what we have to do." I hadn't received advice from him in more than 15 years. He was right, though. So I took the boning knife from our tax accountant, who was slicing into the spit pig, and shoved it inside my father's stomach. I twisted it back and forth, unlocking his spine while his blood spilled forth. Suddenly, everyone around us was screaming and running, a world in motion, but for the plates and the tables and the raccoon who was hiding beneath one. My dad fell onto his side and drained into the forest floor. And I ran in my layers of white dress down a dirt road, out of the shadows of the trees, along a naked forever highway, and back at last to the concrete of the city, where the men were my age, and my mother was dead, thank God. My brother, who was smarter than me, had stabbed her to death years ago. All right, I have one more. This one's not published. It's one of those, I don't know if you guys ever write stuff that's like, you like it, but probably no one else is going to like it, but you don't really care, and maybe it'll never get put. Well, that's this one. It's tiny, but you know, that's how I feel about this one. It's called I Wouldn't Know It and He Wouldn't Know It. My man was in the hands of a handsome doctor, and I worried. The type of moneyed good guy who was deficient in doubt, who when driving his vintage convertible through a long damp tunnel that had been cored from the thick of a mountain, never thought about collapse. But collapse was the diagnosis he entered. First, pulmonary embolism, then a tap, 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 backspace erase. Now bilateral interstitial pneumonia. He told us both, one shoe on the foot of the ER bed, an elbow on that knee. I did not have a screen of my own, or more fact than he had. If he were wrong, who would know? His own body had hatched from bodies that had been well into old age. So too, he wouldn't intuit a mismatch between hazard and what it is named. It's a condition he shared with his best friend, a male gynecologist. He and his friend and my man were all cyclists. These were the things we discussed, save my skepticizing. Outside, an older woman attempted to call back, outside the window, an older woman attempted to call back a poodle in a bow tie collar who ran oblivious on the grass, digging at a gopher hole, sniffing every bush, lifting a leg. All right. That'll do it. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for getting this started. And I think anytime I write something that I kind of like, I can guarantee that nobody else is gonna like it. All right, and make sure you grab Kara's book from Split Lip Press. Totally not biased in saying they're an amazing, incredible, one of the best presses out there. Our next reader is Ryan Ridge, who is the author of 8 books, including the story collection New Bad News from Saraband Books and the poetry chapbook Ox from Alternating Current. His work has appeared in Denver Quarterly, Moon City, Passages North, Post Road, Salt Hill, Santa Monica Review, Southwest Review, and elsewhere. An associate professor at Weber State University, he co-directs the creative writing program. In addition to his work as a writer and teacher, Ridge plays bass in the Snarlin' Yarns. He is working on a novel.
Hey, thank you, David. Thank you for having me. And Kara, that was amazing. You know, I think every third line was an aphorism that belongs in a book. I'm not going to kind of hit that same quota, but maybe every 10th line. That's what I'm hoping for. Kara, that was so good. So I'm going to read from New Bad News. It came out in 2020, and we all know what happened that year. The Dodgers won the World Series. And I'm going to read from the beginning of this book. And they say, you know, there's 2 stories. Character comes to town, character leaves town. This is both, just essentially about an actor riding his motorcycle around Los Angeles, thinking about leaving. So this first part's called Jackson Brown. And it begins with an epigraph by Jackson Brown. I grew up reading Shakespeare and Mark Twain. These days, he strums his guitar with an unregistered handgun in the alleyway at the psychedelic street fair. The acoustics are astonishing. After the failure of the 60s came the disappointment of the 70s. Now every decade feels like the last. It's a story older than prime real estate itself. In the country western sunshine, our heartbeats beat in 3/4 time. As you waltz into Albertsons on Alvarado Street to buy a bag of avocados, everything costs more in California. Nothing is sacred but profitable cinema. Out-of-work actors can't catch a break, so instead we fall into afternoon movies, comedy, dramedy, urban tragedy. Most lives are silent films no one sees. He handguns his guitar in an alleyway at the psychedelic street fair. His weapons of choice are 1, his voice, and 2, like a cartoon, an acoustic piano dropped from a ballroom balcony in the rain. But it hardly ever rains anymore. These minor chords sound exactly like the distance between us and the ocean. Is there, but it only belongs to itself. Fire consumes businesses near the freeway. Fire consumes businesses near the freeway the first Friday of every third month. The sign above tonight's burning building says, "Need cash now." But with the sign on fire, it's really no longer a sign, it's a smoldering metaphor. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. That's Yeats, but some say that's not actually Yeats. Somebody say they attribute that to Yeats, but I'm going to give it to Yeats. The residents have gathered together this evening to watch the blaze. They swallow edibles and share stories of the golden age of television. There's no business like unemployment. From our vantage, the fiery sign says, "Ash now." To me, hey, there's nothing wrong with that as a business model. So, they say not to write stories about writers, and I get that, whatever. So I made this about an actor, because then you can just, they're totally ciphers. You can graph anything onto them. But I thought it'd be funny about an actor who's not seen and is looking out at other people that don't see them. So this is called Neighbors. And my neighbor, the librarian, she throws quiet parties on the weekends. Word is she's an avid speed reader. She and her colleagues get cranked up on Adderall and speed through Infinite Jest in a night. The next day they play parlor games on the dead lawn, charading to the evening as I admire them from my panoptical balcony window. They're undoubtedly decent people, despite, these reports in the neighborhood newsletter editorials. You can tell by the PG-13 placement of their hands as they slow dance in the climax of a California sunset, that these are the kind of people you wouldn't mind living next door to. I mean, if they would invited you to a party, you would go. I would. Now, this next one is called Location. You're not paralyzed on beer by a diminishing river. You're not setting the doghouse on fire on the lawn. You're not banking in Zurich or London or any of the secret tax shelters of the Caribbean. You're not camping under a bridge downtown or beneath any of the great expressway ramps in the suburbs. You're not getting high on the roof of the hospital with a rowdy orderly named Ronnie. You're not dancing with yourself at your best friend's second wedding. You're not developing a film in an undeveloped country. You're not returning to school to become an X-ray technician. You're not breaking down on an LA freeway on your way to a Silver Lake potluck. You're not drinking port wine with longshoremen in San Pedro again. You're not stealing Roberto Bolaño books from the nearby library. You're not posting for the spy satellites at a teenage riot. You're not riding your Triumph motorcycle straight into the sea. You're here. And you know what? You're still here. Coyote. Night calls the animals to the streets. I'm on the Triumph, shifting gears amid my own shiftlessness. At the corner of Mohawk and Reservoir, a scrawny coyote sifts through the contents of a trash can. In neighborhood newsletter editorials, coyotes are nuisances. In folklore, trickster figures. Whenever one shows up, watch out. Something exciting is going to happen. I'm stopped at a traffic light, watching the coyote lap up leftover malt liquor from a 40 of Colt 45. I admire a coyote that drinks. I give my horn a quick tap of approval. The coyote looks at me with its eyes aglow. I look at the coyote, and for a split second, we understand all there is to understand. We understand each other. Nothing lasts. The light changes. I quit smoking about 7 years ago, but it was always fun to do that, frankly. This is called Last Cigarette. Every cigarette you don't smoke adds another 4.8 minutes to your life, a concerned citizen said to me in front of Paramount Pictures after a botched audition. I did not light my cigarette. 5 minutes later, I sit at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, torching a Lucky Strike in front of Rudolph Valentino's mausoleum. Now, that guy liked his cigarettes. I was picturing him smoking in one of those old silent films when a punk kid interrupted my fun. The blood red lettering on his t-shirt said, "Punk's still dead." "Hey, man," the kid said, "where's Johnny?" "Johnny," I said. "Johnny Ramone." I told him Johnny Ramone was up in heaven now. "No shit, shitbird," he said. "I'm looking for his stone." I lit another cigarette. The kid made an outrageous face. "You shouldn't do that," he said. I exhaled, said, "What?" He said, "Your selfish nihilistic attitude towards your own health is not only destroying yourself and the planet," he said, "but it's also exposing me to harmful toxins. And because I'd like to grow up to be a successful entertainment lawyer, I can't have it. I either put out the cigarette or you face the consequences." I took another drag and he pulled out a switchblade and he stuck me in the stomach. I sat down on the side of the mausoleum, bleeding. The kid vanished behind a nearby tomb. I finished my cigarette. You know, they say, I don't know, what's the number of statistics that are made up on the spot? We'll just say 75%, but I think this one's close to right. I think 80% of screenplays aren't made. You can look me up on that. I think it's ballpark. Now, what got me onto that? Unemployment. This is called Unemployment Office. Very short piece. My wind up to this piece is longer than the piece, so I'm going to warn you on that. Unemployment Office. My screenplay wasn't working, so I sent it to the Unemployment Office. Thank you. Then I got two more of these. Actually, maybe one more. Let's see. Yeah, got one more. So this last one's called Climate Change. California was behind me, more of a speck than a spectacle. I'd sold everything except for my Triumph and a change of clothes. It was winter, but it felt like spring. The seasons had turned strange. Outside Houston, I was drinking with some old astronauts at the old astronaut bar. One guy had been to space. Asked him what he thought about climate change. He said, "I've been to space." "Yeah," I said, "what was that like?" Says, "a lot like climate change. No one cares." Thank you all.
All right, thanks, Ryan. I think you were more like every 6 lines versus every 10 lines, so didn't give yourself enough credit there. Our next reader has a wonderfully succinct bio. Lucy Zhang writes, codes, and watches anime. You can find her at, I'll link to her website, or on Twitter at dango_ramen. Lucy, it's all yours.
Thank you. So I'll be reading 2 pieces. The first one is called No One Sleeps on an Empty Stomach, and it was originally published in Flash Fiction Online. For Hungry Ghost Month, Sister and I put out bowls of persimmons, plums, and freshly steamed buns filled with sweet red bean paste. Mom locks the doors and windows while we sit on a yoga mat, playing Stratego and fighting over the last Hello Panda biscuits. Once a year, we stay indoors. No walking to the bus stop, going to school, chasing the crows from our backyard. These days always fall on full moons, the day of the fall harvest, the rebirth of ancestors, Mom says. We burn joss paper by the fireplace, and the house fills with the scent of incense. It's supposed to appease Auntie, who died last year after a stray bullet from a local gang war passed straight through her car window and into her head. An instant death, the police said. Mom shook her head and told us never to go near the ghetto areas of the neighborhood. Auntie was the younger, prettier, wilder sibling, always taking us snowboarding or skydiving or scuba diving when Mom was busy on call or answering her never-ending emails. Mom doesn't keep any photos of Auntie around the house. They're buried in her drawer with tax forms and receipts from decades ago. I think Mom is afraid Auntie will leave hell, sneak into our house and steal our lives away. Mom didn't even attend Auntie's funeral. I had to beg our neighbors to drive sister and me to the florist for a bouquet of white irises. At the cemetery, we huddled together in front of Auntie's gravestone, my eyes closed to the breeze on my eczema-plagued skin, and sister sobbing and clinging to my arm. I brought one iris home to place on our dining table. The next morning, I found it tossed in the trash. We stay cooped indoors, waiting for the hungry ghosts to take our offerings and depart. I secretly replaced the ripe persimmons in the bowl with the astringent ones, certain the ghosts will not be able to tell. Death dulls the taste buds. Even though Mom knows I like persimmons best, she sacrifices my favorite fruits rather than the bananas sister insists she needs for her kale almond butter smoothies. Sister tells me to chill because they're just persimmons, but Mom only buys them when the store gets rid of all their misshapen produce for cheap. After the ghosts have their fill, we're allowed outside to float lanterns on the river bordering downtown and the corner Goodwill. The lanterns are shaped like lotuses, and we place them on wood boards before sending them down the current, hoping they'll make it far without toppling. The lanterns are how the ghosts find their way back. I ask Mom why we can't give the ghosts flashlights, but she just laughs. Ghosts can't grip flashlights, but apparently they can touch us if they make eye contact. During the days following fall harvest, Mom orders us to only look down at our feet lest we get caught and dragged to hell. Sister ignores Mom and operates like usual, attending track meets, leading the dorky guys on, indulging their tangents on meteorites in Antarctica. She makes eye contact with everyone, at least partially to flaunt her long eyelashes coated in mascara and her eyes blossoming in smoky eyeshadow. Auntie taught sister how to apply eyeshadow each morning. I chose to sleep in for a few minutes before bolting for the school bus. Makeup inspires confidence, Auntie would say. Always make eye contact, speak your mind. When it was just Mom and us, Mom would shake her head and warn us, don't listen to Auntie. Looking someone in the eye is just asking for trouble. I think Mom would rather die than confront someone. Even while we crowded onto a local bus in Fuzhou and she saw a man sneak a hand under my skirt, she lightly pushed me toward the window, expressionless as the man grazed her thigh instead. I followed Mom's instructions and stare at the ground when I talk to others. I avoid raising my hand in class, shy away from crowds. I do this even when it's not Hungry Ghost Month, more comfortable with tiles and pavement than pupils. Sister's friends who dance at Qingyang Studio with the long red ribbons and sparkling shopa joke that I have a fixed head, like those foil people twisted into a position they hold for the rest of their lives. Sister laughs with them as I look down, unable to associate faces with voices. Do you think we need to offer more? I ask Mom. The fruits and buns must not be enough. That's why Auntie keeps coming back. Mom shakes her head and says it's not worth it. If Auntie wants to eat human souls, fruit can only do so much. On the last day of Ghost Month, I tell Sister the bubble tea vendor is offering 2 cups for $3. And if you buy a 韭菜盒子, you'll get a third free. The vendor knows the kids like bubble tea and visit in hordes. He normally sets his food stand near the river, a few minutes away from the shopping district. I don't have friends to share bubble tea with, and I rarely walk to the stalls alone because Mom says it's not safe. But when Sister and her friends aren't complaining about calories, they're inhaling sugar. She leaves with a $20 bill Mom gave each of us to buy lunch from the school cafeteria next week. I am reminded of when Auntie would give us crisp $5 bills and tell us to buy something nice, like Skittles or lipstick. I stay up that night, monitoring the bowl of fruit, ensuring it stays untouched. Auntie should be on her way back, following the light from the lanterns, stumbling upon sister, meeting her gaze head on and latching onto her arm. I wonder if this is enough to stop Auntie from coming back. So the next piece is called Like Chalk, published in Apple Valley Review. Like chalk. Pawpaw says not to drink milk because it contains pureed calf brains and chalk and embalming fluid. She doesn't trust milk, says it's too white, too homogeneous, and when you can't see through things, there must be something to hide. Formaldehyde kills kids, and there's no greater crime besides not signing them up for summer school. You know, brains don't taste half bad, a bit mushy, but buttery and rich like pudding, which Pawpaw also disapproves of, foods that come in plastic cups and jiggle with a tap. Her son, not the one who went to Harvard, the other one who took a leave from high school, failed to get into state school, gamed all day while his parents thought he was working on a startup, finally left house to go to community college, just up and disappeared without a suitcase or a backpack, leaving behind a note stating he had gone to study robotics and not to donate his Nintendo Switch. But the house isn't entirely empty, not with her filial son's wife staying the month while they prepare to move into a freshly purchased townhouse. The next big thing, home ownership, maybe a dog, but better a cat, or best a garden of scallion and Swiss chard, which have no fur, no hair, no sweat, no condom wrappers, no stench to lint roll away or sweep under the bed. But Pawpaw knows to pick her battles, since kids always want pets, and if they can handle Bao the ragdoll kitty, who doesn't seem to shed, and if she doesn't need to take care of the litter when they're on vacation, she will concede this one. Pawpaw knows best, truly. When she's dusting the stair rails with old napkins to save paper, when she's scouring the web for traces of her son, the failure who may or may not be at community college, not the one headed for promotion this cycle. She has her doubts, but muffles them up, smothers them with love because her other son is expecting a family, a baby who has yet to dig its roots into the earth, find a patch of dirt with enough sunlight, oxygen, nitrogen, a baby who cannot, under any circumstance, be nourished by milk. Pawpaw uses a computer like a tech whiz, understands a user interface before her sons can even familiarize themselves with it, knows what terms to type into Google to get her answer in the first search result. But she is unable to find her son's name in any graduation list. It would have been nice for the entire family to be around, sitting at the dinner table, praising her suansaiyu, a dish whose heat she can't handle but her son's love. Always extra chili peppers, another heaping spoon of doubanjiang, doused in white pepper. But she tries to forget the disappearing son by thinking about her daughter-in-law and the fetus. Our bodies don't do well without milk, Pawpaw warns. Some things can't be compromised, and especially now, Pawpaw must secure a future where her grandchild sprouts like a tree, strong and infallible. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Lucy. Make sure you check out her chapbook. The link is in the chat. Our final reader, Tyler Barton, is the author of Eternal Night at the Nature Museum from Sarah Band Books and The Quiet Part Loud from Split Lip. He lives in the high peaks of the Adirondack Park and teaches writing workshops to the incarcerated elderly. You can learn more at GOF Tyler or tsbarton.com.
Thanks so much, David. And thanks everyone for being here. And thanks so much to Lucy, Ryan, and Kara for joining me tonight and reading. Your readings were awesome. So funny, and Lucy, so moving. Thank you so much. I'm gonna read a piece from my book, which came out about a year ago. It is a real quick little micro, and it's called Midtown. And like Ryan was saying before, how you shouldn't write about a writer, you just pick a different art form and write about them like they're a writer. Well, you can do the same thing with a poet. I'm just kidding, I'm a poet myself, but this is about a poet. Midtown. The poet mopped the floor with us. The poet opened up like a cornered sky and fell on us. The poet felled us. The lights flickered. No drinks were ordered. Nobody rose for the pisser. The poet, warned about force, put everything internal up for sale for free on the front porch of their voice. And we carried all we could handle home. For days, we walked slower for how the poet had made us feel about trees. We just needed to touch every trunk, rub the leaves, smell our hands, compose dark, sloppy emails about how it all felt. Emails we then sent to the poet, who never responded, but did post online that they were not in a good place mentally, and then apologized for transgressions no one in the poet's life remembered. A picture of our sorry faces was taken for the paper, and the headline said, "The tops of these people's heads have been taken off by a poet." And of course we read the article, shared it, clipped it out, pinned it up at work, watched it watch us wither, all the while turning over the article's pull quote. "I think a poem is a dig site. I'm talking archaeological. There's some shit down there," the poet said. "And I just want one thing on the record. I'm sorry I couldn't get through the book signing without crying. I don't know what's wrong with me." We promised our loved ones, though later, of course, we would fail, that we would never forget how the poet had trounced us. That night of the reading, we'd eaten dinner early or out or alone as usual, just to be on time for our trouncing. After all, we had come out there to be trounced, and we had been hurt well and good, had been dunked on. We had, by the poet, been altered. Our hands still sting from the applause. We didn't know when to clap. We didn't know when to clap, and then we didn't know when to stop. Thank you. It's very funny that I misspoke one of my favorite sentences that I've ever written. We didn't know when to clap. Anyway, okay. I am now going to read something new. This came out in No Contact magazine during the pandemic. And as I was writing this piece, it's called Masterclass Testimonials. As I was writing this piece, I really was picturing it or like imagining reading it out loud, like it was a piece to be performed. And I was going through what I should read tonight and like going through my chapbook too that came out a couple years ago. And I was just like, nothing really feels as exciting to me as this piece. It is Flash, it's 1,000 words, so it's a little bit on the longer side for Flash, but yeah, I don't need to ask anyone, I bet, what Masterclass is. I'm sure you know, but it's called Masterclass Testimonials. Oh, and I'm so sorry. So the story is also in sections, and I'm gonna be that asshole who says like 1 and 2 out loud, and there are 5 sections, so you'll have to hear me do that 5 times. I just feel like it needs it. So, okay, Masterclass Testimonials. 1. One man tried to teach me that even crossing the street was a negotiation. One man tried to teach me an acronym for what he called enlightenment. One man tried to teach me how to play the rings of a tree like a vinyl record. One man tried to convince me that the software had glitched by blinking his eyes repeatedly and emitting a dull drone with his mouth. One man mocked the fact that self-love was how the meek measured progress. One man tried to teach me that the photo of my son holding an onion by the tunic did not work due to the rule of thirds. One man tried to prove it was the mob who gave the White House the green light for war. One man suggested certain homes just resist renovation, something to do with auras and fault lines. 2. One man tried to teach me mirrors were for the weak. The same man tried to cheer me with a promise that I had learned it wrong. It was the weak who would inherit the earth. One man floated the idea that it takes longer to fall in love than it does to heal, so we should get started now. But all I wanted was to learn perfect German, which was what the promo promised. One man peed sitting down out of what he called chivalry, and one man swore he had a freckle on his dick, the precise size and shape of his dick. One man tried to shut me up by letting me talk, and it worked. One man shouted, "Stop scrolling and fucking listen for once," and that night I crashed my car. One man tried to make me laugh in the hospital, knowing full well my cracked rib could snap. One man tried to teach me how to forge a new rib from scrap metal, body spray, spit. One man had the audacity to teach me what he called a little lesson about money by not honoring the refund policy. 3. One man was my father reminding me that I'd had a happy childhood, after all, hadn't I? But I hadn't yet learned how to tell him that his point, while true, was moot. I tried to teach the loud society of earthworms in my tiny backyard to worship me over the moon. I tried to teach myself to love exercise, but it only worked if I was listening loudly to men through my earphones, jawing about the 10 central myths of freedom. One man I discovered during my period of menlessness was not enough to change anything about a person's understanding of consciousness. One man reached out to apologize for my experience, but I deleted the email. One man on a very different platform promised that for one photograph of my feet in harsh light, I would inherit the earth. I tried to teach myself weightlifting and soon became trapped beneath the bar screaming until my son came into the basement crying, witnessing it. But then something happened. I heaved the whole thing off of me. Though I couldn't call what happened learning or a work of God or the fruits of proper training or anything except for evidence that there are chemicals in me I simply have not met yet. One man said he was seeing God, and I thought because he was speaking to camera, he meant me. One man said there were only 7 stories. Oh, sorry. Section 5. One man said he was seeing God, and I thought because he was speaking to camera, he meant me. One man said there were only 7 stories. One man swore there were only 3, and another one proved that the number was none. One man said one true thing, but I fear sharing it will trigger the slow process of falsification. One man said that when you get this feeling, you know the one, he whispered soberly to camera, just go for a brisk wooded walk. So I went and walked until breathing got hard and harder and then suddenly oddly easy. And the trees started speaking to me, but I didn't know the language, which I swear almost brought me back to the software. I taught myself that, almost. Also, I should say, I am nearly out of money, but I do now have the earth, this earth, if anyone still wants it. Thank you. And I am going to close by reading a series of very short stories. They are from a series called To Work, and they are all stories about people with different jobs. So they're very short little microfictions. These people all kind of exist in the same fucked up world, but their paths cross only very glancingly. And I have lost my pages. Wow. There it is. Perfect. Okay. This is called To Cover. Candy accrued both wealth and fame for her line of tote bags made from recycled tote bags. On the side of each tote bag, it said, "I used to be a tote bag." The bag sold few at first, a marginal garment, until a member of the world's most tasteful boy band was caught on video wearing the tote bag at a California water park. The tote bag and nothing else. It was the second stage of the boy band member's mental break, which had begun earlier that day when he dug a hole beneath the entrance gate. Candy couldn't get the totes sewn fast enough. She raised the price from 15 to 50 and no one said a word. Unbelievable. Her father had been right all along. A tote bag really can change the world. Yes, the world, but namely that little landlocked city in Amish country where Candy set up her headquarters. The place got odd. Accessory morphed into myth. Everywhere was a sexiness, the smart bag, a sharp symbol, a totem, a home, a blanket. At least that's what this 3-year-old thinks as she plucks it off the floor of the hospital corridor, just outside the room that holds a catatonic boy band member. A blanket, which the girl drags behind her as she veers across the halls, looking for, what was it again? Oh, right, that room full of mirrors. And I'm going to read a few more of these little work stories. I have a full manuscript of these and I haven't really done anything with it yet. I'm not sure that it's done, but I've at least stopped writing new ones and now I just keep fiddling with all the little pieces. So this one is called To Drag. Drea got a job as a grief counselor at a funeral home. She found the gig on Indeed, snuggled between burrito wrapper at the corn crib and tuba tutor at an art school. For references, she listed the names of friends who had blurbed her second collection of poetry. When she got the offer, she negotiated up 5%, but Drea discovered quickly that people's grief was very, very bad for her skin. Her family worried about her over the Thanksgiving dinner table, offered mailroom positions at their various offices, and cousin Kelvin even offered to put a good word in at the tote bag company. Drea scoffed and said they were being griefist, meaning her family had preconceived views about the grieving, about mourners, about even the dead themselves. It's because no one in this family has ever died, she screamed, and afterwards patted her grandmothers and grandfathers on their respective heads. Drea asked for an apology from each family member. They refused. They were all confused. Everyone is confused, she said. Then she led them to her office and lay in a casket and closed the cover and announced that each person guilty of holding griefist views was, one by one, to approach the coffin, lift its lid, and apologize. And you had better act like you really mean it, she said. Drea made, over the course of her life, enough money to have her entire family killed. She just never had it all at once, and so could never get the job done. Oh well, their loss. It would be a privilege to be killed by me, she thought, and then realized the person in her office was crying into his hands. Drea offered him a tissue, but when he reached for it, it must have been the tears he missed, just grasping at the air. Thank you. And I'm going to close with one more short piece from my book. The book is Eternal Night at the Nature Museum, and I think you probably can't see this because I have a blur on my screen, but it's a beautiful cover. It's from Saraband Books, and yeah, here's another micro from that book. This is where the book gets its title, and it's called Eternal Night at the Nature Museum, a half-hour downriver from 3 Mile Island. On the roof grows a tree facilities kills every summer. Killed, rather, as the men from facilities are gone, as everyone, staff, faculty, public, is gone for what Harrisburg still calls temporary. The museum belongs to no one now, or rather belongs to that tree, or to the animals in their chewed through glass, or to the time we lost a snake. Every time we lost a snake we couldn't find for days and stayed open for visitors anyway. What I mean is the museum belongs to, I don't know, some kid, the one I sensed hiding in every building I ever closed down for the night, the same kid I imagined stowing away inside the tree trunk or the shark's mouth or the trash tote in the mop closet, this milk-mouthed kid with nothing to lose, too spooked to say uncle after having chosen hiding, now living out what was never a Disneyland fantasy, but rather the lesser of two letdowns. Life, alone in a building full of owl eggs, appeal letters, revisionist archaeology, and the Arctic wolves who leap like puppies, glass eyes gleaming through their taxidermy. The building belongs to, yes, this starved sapling of a person. And the minute the kid finishes the fish food, cracks 2 teeth on hematite, retches up the crickets, licks all the pollen from the dead bee's legs, the climbing begins. Upstairs, up stories, learning from the lizards who clawed away their cages, this kid will bore with whittled obsidian and patience a hole through the 3rd floor utility door, behind which lies the ladder, and so the roof, and so the tree, and so the fruit. Thank you. And thanks again to David for putting this together, and for Kara, Ryan, and Lucy for being involved. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tyler. And unfortunately, that brings us to a close. I want to thank Kara, Ryan, Lucy, and Tyler again for bringing us back. I can't imagine a better group of readers to do that. Please buy their books. All of the links are in the chat. Definitely buy their books, share their work, read them, love them. Follow David has Zoom Pro on Twitter to find out about future readings. Again, selfish, narcissistic title, but I stuck with it. I'm not going to quit. Our next reading will be October 20th, and I will announce who that is very shortly. And one more time, Zoom round of applause, shout out in the chat for our amazing readers. All right, and thank you all for tuning in. I will see everyone hopefully next time.
Thanks again, David.
Thanks so much.